Mr. President, may I echo Robin in saying what a privilege and pleasure it is for us to have you here. I know how busy you are while you're in London. There's a cricketing expression called a googly, which is when a ball is bowled at you, which you weren't expecting, and you just bowled one at me because I thought...
You've done that repeatedly to me, so what's new?
Which is that you're not going to make a prepared remark. We were going to have a conversation. And what I'm going to do is open the floor up after a while, because I know that there are a lot of people bursting to ask you questions. I think the first obvious question to ask you is, when is the next edition of your book coming out? Because you wrote it 8 years ago, and it's very rare to have the author of the manual actually running, managing a state and implementing your own, as it were, your own theories. Have you learnt a lot even since the time that you wrote the book with Claire Lockhart 6 or 7 years ago?
Well, in the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, first of all, thank you for having me. I was so looking forward to Chatham House rule being applied in Chatham House. But of course, well, I'd love a public conversation, and thank you for those kind words. But yes, because learning is a continuous process. So let me just make a couple of framing questions. First thing I've learned is how to create political capital. What the technical discussions ignore is fundamentally that all processes of state formation are political and moral. You need a moral campus in order to put the country above yourself. And that means you have to generate political capital, not political division. The act that my colleague and friend Dr. Abdullah, our VPs, our all friends, were able to take in Afghanistan required both moral courage and determination and a sense that divisive politics would lead to denial of opportunities to the absolute majority of the people, and hence, that's the first point. Second is, there's a lot of discussion on political will in the literature, but it's not grounded in anything. So they say, well, they either have political will or they don't. What's the dynamic of creating political will? The first basis of having political will is to have political capital. Because then you calculate how much of it you're willing to use and how will you renew it. This means, going back to one of the critical issues that we put in fixing failed state, is that the purpose of the state, if you still speak in that kind of moral language, is to serve the citizens. I'm a servant. And as servant, I know who my masters are. And my masters are the citizens of Afghanistan. So we need to be able to generate the decisions that allows this dynamic. We've taken hard decisions. It has resulted in temporary depletion of our political capital, but because they were based on well thought through actions, the capital got enhanced. And hence, the other is, governing, unlike academic thinking, is relentless. Time does not wait for you. Had we not confronted the Kabul Bank on the second day, I would not have the political capital to speak to the world or to our people. Had we not taken the decision to approve the bilateral security agreement, sign the bilateral security agreement and the status of force agreements, we would not have had the consensus. So these are part of the issue. The other is, theory, if it's to be translated to practice, needs focus. And focus means, you have to acknowledge what you inherit. And what you inherit is both dysfunctionality and pockets of excellence, And it requires determination to define what the problem is. In building the process of the state, owning the problem is fundamental to solving it. If we are in denial that we have a problem, we cannot formulate a vision.
You mentioned, I mean, the opinion polls about you in Afghanistan are truly extraordinary. I mean, you must be the most perhaps popular person since opinion polls started in Afghanistan, but certainly you're riding very, very high. And you mentioned managing expectations, and yet you face a number of very serious challenges. I mean, economic, security, political, and so on. How can you continue to meet those expectations and manage those expectations? And you talk of, focus, which presumably means priorities as well. I mean, should priorities be set on the basis of popular expectations?
Well, two things. Don't take opinion polls seriously. They will come and they will change. The key is to have a compass. If you don't have a compass and you shift with the winds, you're not going to deliver to the people. I'm not elected to be popular. I'm elected to be effective. People are going to judge me by effectiveness, by delivery. We got the talk right. It's the doing that creates the sense of confidence. But second, the people of Afghanistan have shown enormous wisdom. I bow to that wisdom. Look, 38% of our women participated in the election. Women who had not gotten in the house for 30 years of their lives got into cars with their husbands who had previously would not allow them or their children and went and voted. What do they want? Why did they come out? From the remotest corners of the country, I had no money. I had no official backing, etc. But why did people come out with such massive numbers? Because they want profound change. And it's that sense now. The people, we had to have a notion very common in political science and other places, the silent majority. Well, the Afghans are not silent. We have voice. And the voice is very loud and clear. So things they want are not things for themselves. People want a different life for our children. A profound overcoming of the last 35 years. So my priorities are those of the people. It's the sense of balancing those on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis that guides me. And I think we will be able to overcome because we have no other choice.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the things that, one of the interpretations of the elections was that people were voting against insecurity. They were voting for a right to choose. They were voting for a safer future. And yet, at the moment, we're facing a horrendous, and please accept our commiserations for all the violence that is taking place, a horrendous spike in violence in terms of civilian casualties, in terms of police and soldiers who are losing their lives or being injured, in terms of people being displaced, IDPs. What do you think explains this spike in violence? Is it a trend or is it a spike? And at a time when security is the top priority for everyone, how can this be addressed?
Well, first let me put in comparative perspective. Every movement of violence before coming to peace spikes up. Look at every single peace agreement in the world. Prior to reaching peace, there's been an upswing because it is about negotiating space. Mm-hmm. It's about demonstrating relevance. Second, attacks on civilians are a sign of weakness. They're not a sign of strength. Who but a coward kills people in a volleyball field? Children. For God's sake, is that the depth in which we've fallen? You know, we use the Islamic civilization defined to humanity at large. We translated Greeks, we translated the Indians, we translated the Chinese and give them to the world. Now, killing the children in a volleyball field is going to deter me. We need to understand that this is a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of strength. Thirdly, if they feel, or anyone else feels, that the Afghan state is about to collapse, I have news for you. We've lived 5,000 years, we are going to be there for another 5,000. Don't misjudge us! And the other thing is, you know, we're determined. We have a national consensus on peace as our priority. Violence is directed to detract us from the path of peace. We will not be detracted. Political problems must be solved politically. But that segment that is dedicated to violence, for the sake of violence, will be isolated. The water within which they were swimming, the pond is going to be dried. Let us be clear. And our security forces, I want to pay tribute to them. You know, they've done their job. The 150,000 ISAF NATO troops were doing. And against all predictions of 4 years ago, both friends of Afghanistan and detractors of it, we are meeting our security targets. On 31st of December, the combat mission of ISAF NATO will end. Afghans, again, will be in charge of legitimate use of force. All decision makings regarding legitimate use of force is going to be vested in the Afghan government. And this will change the dynamic and the narrative. The narrative was that foreigners are here, foreigners are in occupation, foreigners will never leave. It's over. We have taken charge and we are an elected government. And besides being elected, we are a government of national unity. And that should count for something.
Mr. President, I think you've lifted the spirits of many Afghans by talking about the priority you give to bringing peace. At the SARC meeting recently, you talked about just how high a priority this is for you. And you've just said that before peace processes start, there is often a burst in violence. Does this mean that you see a peace process as fairly imminent and that you see a peace process as a fundamental element in bringing that violence to an end?
The peace process is fundamental to bringing it to an end. I'm not going to conduct public diplomacy regarding the peace process. It must be a deliberate process. We intend to deliver. We don't intend to talk about delivery. Give us the space and the time, and you will see the results.
One of the transitions, I know you just come from a very successful conference in which the formation of the government of national unity has been hailed as a terrific opportunity for the country. And you've mentioned the three transitions: the economic transition, the political transition, and the security transition. And I think you were saying that the economic, in a way, is perhaps the most pressing and the most difficult, and where least progress has been made. And that's partly because of the immediate cash flow problem and the long-term structural deficit and so on. How are you going to tackle that? I mean, given the number of priorities and given your well-known commitment to creating jobs and so on, I mean, how are you going to get into that one?
Well, first, the economy got distorted because of the ISAF NATO became the largest economic actor in the country. So the unintended presence of a very large military organization was major economic distortions. It's totally unintended. For instance, the transport sector grew to account for the amazing almost 22% of GDP, because trucking was Afghan for supplies. The construction sector. So every year, the percentage of agriculture in the GDP is declined. Mm-hmm. A lot of cash came, but it did not become capital. So, and also we have a section of their economy that got heavily criminalized, which is part of global criminal networks. The global criminal economy is $1.7 trillion a year, Davos estimation. And the bulk of the profits from the criminalized drug economy goes to the international mafia. So given all this, when we started the security transition, I wrote a paper because arguing that the economy would face very significant challenges. Unfortunately, our colleagues in the development community did not buy my argument. They were very, very optimistic. And their projections, if you look at it, I argued that the rate of growth could come down to 2% or approach zero, and that's where we've reached.
1.5, I think.
So 1.5,
yeah.
Exactly. So now what do we do? The first issue is market building has been very weak. Mm-hmm. International development community talks about private sector as though it's an organic phenomenon and exists everywhere. Market building is an historical process. You in Great Britain, the first work, Marshall on Citizenship, was about how freedoms came as a result of removing restrictions on guilt. Civil rights preceded political. We need to look at those problems that the market can solve. There's an immense potential. For instance, 75% of Kabul's residents are estimated to have informal property rights rather than full property rights. Mm-hmm. Now, in 1978, probably not more than 5% was informal. Next year, we intend to begin a massive program of giving full property rights to people in situ. Right. And figuring this out, I think we've figured it, is going to be a breakthrough.
And this has been tried in Latin America, for
It's been tried in Latin America, but on very small scale.
Yeah.
I think we are going to do it with a combination of learning from Latin America and others. De Soto, my friend, has put the theory. I think, with his help and others, can really do it on a scale that would be very significant. The second element is look at Afghanistan's assets. In first blush, everybody wants to talk about our minerals. I want to reverse the process. We want to first talk about our location. For 200 years, our location has been a disadvantage. In the next 20 years, it's going to become solid gold. All roads between South Asia and Central Asia can only lead through us. We can become the transfer points with East Asia.
The roundabout.
The Asian roundabout. So we are beginning with the first national infrastructure program to connect you. This will generate the capabilities. We've moved from theory to practice Central Asia, South Asia 1000. It's a project that takes electricity from Kyrgyzstan to Tajikistan to Afghanistan to Pakistan. It's been signed into law, into an agreement. And $1.2 billion of financing is already there. We're moving to turn our first major river into a source of generation of electricity and creating the connectivities. Our second asset is water. We have 5 river basins, except for China. We provide water to every one of our neighbors. Yet we only use 10% of our water in modern management. We lose 800 million to $1.5 billion to floods, and then another one to droughts. Managing our water is critical now. So 20 dams, all from internal rivers, that have not been completed, would be the driver of this. Third is, we have money. But money is not capital, because firm formation has not been attempted. So how you get, it's not private sector and abstraction, it's formation of firms, small, medium, and large. We are turning the budget into an instrument. Our budget is 40% of our GDP. but it has not been used to generate economic activities because it's been an abstract relationship between supply and demand. It's these set of connectivities that would end lastly and immediately. We want to go to create one of the most labor-intensive programs after the New Deal, building on those sets of things and combining it with a lot of approaches that we've learned from others, so we can tackle the question of jump-starting the economy.